You're listening to the #1 podcast for nonprofit leaders, getting your nonprofit fully funded. This is the Fundraising Masterminds Podcast.
Tomorrow, if I accept funds from the government, they'll say, oh no, we won't change anything you do. We know that 5 years from now, they will make those changes.
Right.
One of our slogans internally and externally too, when we preach at churches, is I can feed you, house you, and clothe you, but if I don't give you the gospel, I'm just giving you a more comfortable ride to hell. Oof. And so that is something that keeps us focused on. The gospel is the transforming agent.
Welcome back to another episode here at the Fundraising Masterminds Podcast. We are so excited to have you join us today. My name is Jason Galasinski, and with me, my co-host, Jim Dempsey.
Hi, Jason.
And today we have a special guest with us, John Cooper. Welcome, John.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Hey,
So we had John on a few months ago where we were talking about the $10 million story, and we got talking about how gospel rescue missions like his in Niagara are really thriving and doing well. And the amazing thing is we're not getting federal funding. We're actually doing it through proper development. We're doing it through partners, through relationships and vision dinners and follow-ups and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so we thought, it would be good to have John back on to talk about some lessons learned in running a gospel rescue mission.
Because there's got to be other missions around the country that want to not just survive, but thrive without federal funding.
Yeah. Before we get into it, you could hit that subscribe button. And we'd love to know if you are running a gospel rescue mission, what you think of this episode. So be sure to get that comment box open. You can write us some notes and tell us what you think of it as you're going through. But John, I just kind of want to hand it over to you. And John, thanks for being on the show again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And, I can never pass up a trip to Florida. So I'm good to be here.
Yeah.
Always great to have you, John.
You guys have a good 4th of July?
Yeah.
Well, definitely it was a lot of fireworks and way too much food, that's for sure. So, as you can tell.
So, John, I'd love to hear your journey on how you navigated the waters of accepting federal funds or not accepting federal funds. Would you mind telling us about that journey?
Yeah, in the state of New York, like many states, when you accept their money, they control what you do. And looking at the homeless problem across America that every city is facing, the temptation is to say, well, free money, I can have a bigger facility, I can do this, I can do that. But then you read the strings that come with it. And even to the point where the government can fire your director if they're not happy with what you're doing. And so, inevitably, I'm also an ordained minister. So if I'm preaching the gospel, the government should get offended sometimes.
Right.
That's part of the gospel is it cuts us. And so if the government sees that and they don't like it, they can just remove me. So that was number one. I like my job, so I don't want to be removed.
Right.
But they start to slowly, they control how you do things. And it's very subtle in the beginning. It's, don't preach before the meals, make it optional. Right. And that's kind of the way it works. And then it goes from it's not optional to, just no one's coming because it's optional now. Just get rid of it. And now bring these counselors in that do it from this method. And it's just, they make these small suggestions. And when the government's your number one donor, the temptation is to bend. And especially, I got this brand new building. What am I going to do if I say no?
Yes.
Then I have to pay all that money back. Right. And you can really be stuck in a situation that, you have to look down the future and say, do I want to be stuck 25 years from now with having to, be controlled really?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that you said earlier on was the government's idea of homelessness is different than your idea. Can you explain that a bit? Yeah,
for sure. So the Housing First initiative is, they're not homeless anymore if they're in a home. Right. And it's just the title just goes away. Wow. But the problems are still there. And so one of our slogans internally and externally too, when we preach at churches, is I can feed you, house you, and clothe you. But if I don't give you the gospel, I'm just giving you a more comfortable ride to hell. Oof. And so that is something that keeps us focused on. The gospel is the transforming agent, not just for the people in our building, but for our city as a whole. And so that's why we've made the decision to, even if tomorrow, if I accept funds from the government, they'll say, oh no, we won't change anything you do. We know that 5 years from now, they will make those changes.
Right. It's a frog in the kettle, isn't it? They'll slowly turn up the heat. One of the things that I really like, certainly about your mission, is that it is so focused in on the gospel. Mm-hmm. Not having the funds from the government, that probably makes it a little bit tougher. Now, I guess from the standpoint that getting the gospel out there has got to be your primary concern, primary focus. And I love pregnancy centers that share the gospel. I love rescue missions that share the gospel, that they know that there's an overarching issue, whether it be abortion or whether it be homelessness, but the gospel supersedes that. What's the scriptural basis? What kinds of scripture verses do you go to come to that conclusion and that answer?
Yeah, and so Romans 10, obviously, the preaching of the gospel, how will they know if they're not here? How do they hear if there's not a preacher?
Right.
And so that's probably for preaching. Most preachers like me, that's our go-to verse.
Sure.
And historically, it's been called the primary means of grace or the ordinary means of grace, that the preaching of the word is, yes, one-on-one evangelism is absolutely important and necessary, but more people come to salvation under the preaching of the word than really any other means, hence the ordinary or primary means of grace. And so we see that if we start to throw that out, we're not really doing our mission. We're not a gospel mission anymore. One of the verses that hit me last year was James 2:5, where it says, "Listen, my beloved brothers, did not God choose the poor of this world to be rich in faith and heirs of the kingdom which he has promised to those who love him?" And so basically, James 2, the argument that's going on is the rich man comes to the church and the pastor there is putting the poor man over there. And James is saying, what are you doing? Don't you know that the poor is the catalyst to the kingdom?
Right.
And so I think the same is true today, that the poor, we want revival in our area, and all of us want revival. Every Christian wants revival. However, we're not willing to go to the poor person and prioritize the gospel to them. And one thing I heard was, don't they get beat up enough? You're telling them they're a sinner. It's like, well, no, there's only one thing that's going to get them past this point, and that's a heart change, which comes through Jesus Christ.
Yeah. It seems like we always want to solve the symptoms, but we ignore the root barrier that's out there. John, give us an idea. I mean, I love to just see your mission as a success story. Share with me, how many individuals are you reaching a year? How many people are being exposed to the gospel? How many people are coming to Christ? Give us a rough estimate. I'm not expecting you to know the numbers exactly, but yeah. Yeah,
rough estimate is we have 115 that are in our building every day. That's not including the community that comes in for every dinner time feeding. Wow. And so at that dinner time feeding, there is a message, a gospel presentation that myself, my staff, local churches will come in and do that, local pastors and local laymen that come in that feel called to share the gospel, and we're that avenue for them.
Wow.
Then we have preaching for the guys in our overnight shelter that happens every Thursday. We go through a book of the Bible. We're going through Mark right now. And so we're going through the book of Mark, expounding one verse at a time for the homeless there. And again, it's probably, who's heard the gospel in our city. It's pretty much everyone who's in need has at one point heard the gospel. And, do they all get saved when they're in our building? No. Some of them, it takes 4 or 5 times, or they're drunk when they show up. And so you try to sober them up and then share the gospel with them again. Or you see them a month from then, and then they come, and I went back to my house, because we also serve people who can't afford a meal, and they come, but they have a housing, and they say, I really pondered over what you were talking about last month. Wow. And so we see both sides of it.
Oh, that's great. I love that. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, Jason.
So John, you've been able to run this organization without federal funding. That's a stance that you took early on. And it sounds like you've realized that that's a better way to go, in a sense, because it gives you a lot more freedom. But it does ask the question, well, how do you run a rescue mission without federal funding?
Yeah.
When so often everyone's getting their funds from the government.
Yeah. Or even, I feel like, John, you've gotten past survival to thriving. And how have you been able to thrive?
Well, number one, it's focusing on relationships, and not just relationships with rich individuals, right? Because that's what we think in development. Like, if I can find that guy who can write the $100 million check, I'll be fine. But number one, no one knows the guy who can make $100 million.
I know,
so it's not just a relationship with a rich donor; it's the relationship with pastors, and being able to show them why your ministry is a place they can plug in. Another way of Another relationship is with your city. So your fire department, your police department, because guess what? They're going to be there almost every day, right? Because someone passes out, ODs, there's always a scuffle. You're on the front line of ministry. And so building good relationships with the police captain that's at that precinct right near you, and then relationship with your mayor and all that kind of stuff. And really relationship with churches is how we've been able to thrive. And that's not just because we get money from the churches. As we know, not a lot of churches have big budgets, but it's a way we get volunteers, which then keeps your employment costs down. And then it's amazing to see what God's people do when they catch the vision for what's going on and really take their responsibility seriously to care for the poor. They'll send you. We have a guy who he has an employee who knows how to work boiler systems. So guess what? He sends that guy. Well, he's paying him to fix our boiler system.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just that's
right.
That in-kind cost.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, I love that.
So relationships are the key, right, to any kind of long-term development, right?
Yeah.
One of the things you said earlier on was you really focus on connecting with the churches and finding church champions. Can you talk a bit more about how you go about doing that?
Yeah, I mean, we call them church ambassadors is just our way of saying it.
Yeah.
But it's the same deal. We find that one person in the church, again, I'm a pastor, so I understand the pastor is running his own rescue mission, right? He's got people in his church that are, their kids aren't walking with the Lord, or their spouse is dying, or whatever the case. They don't have a lot of time to invest in every missionary that sends them a letter, right? But there's usually someone from that church who was an addict, and that's kind of who we primarily look for. Or they're just someone who's in a rescue mission all the time. They love what we're doing. They have a bug for what we're doing. And I'm like, hey, do you have a relationship with your pastor that you could talk? And then I tell that pastor, this is your go-to guy. He's going to receive an email every month about an update that's going on here. And that's kind of how we build that program. And that program is at this point 2.5 years old. And it's growing because people want to know what's going on.
Yeah.
So
the next one we talked about was making the gospel the center of your focus. Unpack that a little bit for us.
Yeah, I mean, what we try to do is when we open our Bibles, what the Bible says is how we run our ministry. Poor people is not a new thing to God, right?
Exactly.
And so there's a lot in Scripture as to how do you form a ministry around poverty alleviation. And so keeping the gospel centered is number one in-house, in the sense that all of our classes, all of our counseling, everything we do is centered around the gospel. But it's also in our outside, in our fundraising, in our PR, we're not, as Paul says, I'm unashamed of the gospel, for it is the power unto salvation. And so when we go to a church, I preach in probably 20 different churches a year. And when I preach in those churches, I expound on this is the power to save, and I need you here to come preach. I am here preaching.
Right.
And again, in our correspondence before I came down is if you can't pitch your vision for your ministry with an open Bible, you're gonna have a really hard time getting those relationships with those churches.
Yeah, right. So absolutely. Right. Yeah. You got to have that connection point that, because that's what their mission is too. We talk often about finding that intersection between the ministry's mission and the mission of the donor. Well, you're the same way. You are, the finding the mission of your mission and the church, making sure that they intersect together, that you're both heading in the same direction and going down the same path. Yeah.
Could you give a little bit of history on like gospel rescue missions? Like they've changed a lot, right? Or have they?
I mean, I'm no historian by any means of the rescue mission world. However, I mean, you look at a guy like David Wilkerson, wrote the book, The Cross and the Switchblade, and that was Teen Challenge, but Teen Challenge was the same thing. It started as a rescue mission. And, that's what he was doing. I mean, literally dragging people to hear the gospel, same with Billy Sunday, with Salvation Army. I mean, it was all the preaching of the gospel was the center.
Yeah, in fact, I was actually just going to say that. I was going to say Salvation Army, Red Cross, some of those organizations have been, the argument is that some of them have lost their way. And, where are we at in America with our rescue missions?
Why were they so focused on the gospel front and center versus getting them off the streets and giving them a meal?
Because it's the power unto salvation. They firmly believed that the soul was more important than the body. And I think that we can be tempted to say that, well, I can help more people if I just don't preach. Look how many more, I could have 100 more beds tomorrow if I really wanted to. but is that really helping? And do I actually believe that the gospel is not just good works? The gospel is a certain thing. It's coming to Christ and repenting of your sins. And I think that's where guys like Billy Sunday, he knew that I had, he started like a mini revival. I mean, this is, again, we want revival. Are we willing to do the hard work of preaching the gospel?
Yeah. John, we also talked a little bit about getting the community to buy into the vision that you have as well, too. What are some of the steps that you've had to take or to use to get the community to buy in? I know you and I have talked a lot about that PR component of development, getting the message out, public awareness. What are some of the things that you've tried to do to get the community aligned with your mission?
One I did that I don't suggest for everybody is when it was 18 degrees out, I actually walked our Code Blue route, which is the van that we send to pick up homeless people in the wintertime. And it was 34 miles, and it was tough, but it worked. I mean, the news media started calling us because they wanted more interviews. So that's one that we did really, and I know this is your guys' thing. The Vision Dinner was extremely helpful to bring in 500 individuals, and I'd say about a little more than half had never even heard of our organization before. And they got to see, again, a vision from God's word. And really what I shared with them was Nehemiah 2:17, where Jerusalem lies in waste. Nehemiah has gotten permission from the king to go and observe the wall. And what he says is, then I said to them, he's talking to the Jews, he says, you see the calamity we are in, that Jerusalem lies in waste and its gates are burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, that we will no longer be a reproach. And it's just funny because he's like, didn't you look around you? And that was really my message was, look around you. We all are waiting for $500 million man to come fix our problem. He's not coming.
No.
So let's look around us and let's rebuild. And I feel like the Christian community needs to do that in wherever you're at. Orlando, Nashville, Niagara Falls, doesn't matter. Do you see the calamity we're in? Let us, the church, come arise and build. And if you sacrifice, and if you say, the gospel can't be centered to what I do, don't expect to see rebuilding.
John, what do you see as the church's role in helping with homelessness, as an example?
I see it a command from Christ. He says to help the poor. So that when our commander and king commands us something of us, our ears better perk up. As a military veteran, when my commander said go, you went. I think a challenge for a lot of churches is they don't know how. Or you can't open a rescue mission in the basement of every church, right? So there needs to be a collaboration of churches that get together and kind of put aside some of their secondary doctrinal issues to say our command from our king is to help the community and to help the poor in our community. And we can all be centered around the gospel being the crux of that. And that's where rescue missions really can be that gap. I always say we're a trench the church comes and fights in because we're that avenue where come to us. We'll point you in the right direction, and you shoot that gospel machine gun out there.
Well, I really see you as an extension of the church in so many ways. I think about when we lived in the Washington, D.C. area, our church, was always looking for a way to help with the homelessness issue, and we'd always turn to Central Union Mission in our town, whether it was helping at Thanksgiving or packaging food packets up or whatever the effort that needed, providing scarves in the wintertime, whatever. What are some of the things that you do at your mission to be the extension of the church?
Yeah, so we do an event called Feed the Falls, and it's Thanksgiving, Christmas, and in a couple of weeks we'll be doing our first summertime one. And basically what we do is we go out there, we get 2,000 meals prepped, and we deliver them to houses in the area. And so people call ahead to get their, to reserve their order in that. And then the teams that go out to deliver them are encouraged to share the gospel with those or ask, how can I pray for you? Just try to find an open door to get the gospel into that home. And they're going to that person's home. Now, obviously, either a volunteer feels nervous and they don't, or the person doesn't want to hear it, just give me my meal. But there's great conversations that come from that. Other ways is like I said, we preach the gospel every day. So anyone that wants to come every single day, that pulpit is open for preaching. So we invite local churches that are already involved with us to come in and have this opportunity to share the gospel with the needy in the community.
Wow. Well, John, I've got to believe that it's not easy not taking federal funding. There's that temptation is always going to be out there, but I feel like you've found the balance, and especially when it comes to that no compromise stance that we got to get the gospel out. And if taking federal funding means we don't get to spread the gospel, then give it to somebody else in a sense.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a good, thing to prioritize the gospel over whatever the government is telling you to do, right, at that particular time. There might be some people listening who maybe you feel trapped, or maybe you feel like, you know what, I've been taking federal funds and I would love to not have that burden, but I just don't know where to go.
Like where do
I start? Right. Yeah. So we always talk about the perfect vision in our mentorship program, but really, I mean, if you were starting a organization from scratch and you didn't have anything, getting your board together in a room, name storming some key individuals, learning how to get the right people in the room and pitching the vision, doing that the right way, that's all you need to kickstart. And that's really what John did, last year. He joined the Perfect Vision Dinner Mentorship Program. He went through the recipe that we teach, raised over $178,000 in one night. And he doesn't need federal funding, right?
No.
And so he, in a sense, he can do whatever the Lord has put on his heart to do.
Yeah.
And we would love to have other gospel rescue missions kind of learning and discovering this as well.
We'd love to be there to help to fill that void. Yeah.
So if you're interested in learning about this, I'm going to put a QR code on the screen. You can scan that with your phone, or you can click the link in the description, and that'll take you to our website where you can learn more about the Perfect Vision Dinner Mentorship Program. Now, we're in the middle of the summertime, so the next Vision Dinner program starts in October. But still, I would recommend you get in touch with us. Let's have a conversation, and we can help you figure out if this program is right for you. But John, I really admire you in taking a stand, because I know that it's not easy, to reject free money, right? But
kind of buck the trend, huh?
But I think it's really necessary because really, and this is kind of where Jim and I are at, is we're not just trying to, get dollars in the door, because the problem with nonprofits is not money. The problem is learning how to build relationships and trust. And just similarly, the problem with homelessness isn't, just that they're homeless. That there's deeper heart issues there, and we want to bring a heart change. The person isn't going to really be transformed until they hear the gospel and come to Christ. Ultimately, that's where the long-term solutions come in.
Right.
And people who started gospel rescue missions ages ago, 100, 200 years ago, understood that.
Yeah.
So in a way, we're just really trying to call everyone back to their roots, and say, remember why you started, remember why this thing used to exist. And it was really the church that, in a way, spearheaded the rescue mission process, and so we'd love to see the church get back in the game, so to speak, and get involved,
Yeah.
Well, John, as we're wrapping up the episode, why don't you give us just kind of a bottom line? If you were in an area where you felt the Lord tugging at your heart to start a gospel rescue mission in your town, and you didn't know where to start, you kind of like this idea of doing fundraising, not fundraising, and building partners and getting involved in the community. Can you give us like a bottom line kind of steps of like, what would you do if you could start over, and how would you get your rescue mission started?
Yeah, I would go how we started back in 2007. Go to 5 churches, say, we all see the need in our area. Let's meet this need. I'm willing to be the one to spearhead this. We started in an RV, serving soup and preaching the gospel on one of the more dangerous streets in Western New York, during gang stuff and all that kind of stuff. And that's how we started. Eventually, we got a house. And so I would just say, go to your key churches, especially your local church that you're going to. Talk to your pastor, say, this is my plan. It's very basic. I want to go out there and do street ministry. So start with street ministry, go to churches, and then go to your community. So your mayor, your police chief, your fire department, whoever, and say, we all see this need. This is how we're going to meet it. And then you allow your mayor, he wants to see his homeless problem go away because that makes him look better too. So he may be able to connect you with those wealthy individuals, those that can help fund your effort, but be patient. It's not going to happen overnight. Continue to build relationships, share your vision. And I would just say, if you're starting from ground up, you need to be in 10 different churches a year preaching or sharing an update of what we're trying to do. And then go through the Perfect Vision Dinner course once you get enough people to be table hosts. So that way you can really pitch that vision to people that we're here to rebuild the city. And you may, especially if you're a city that has nothing for homeless, I would almost guarantee you're going to be able to fill that place.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
Well, thanks, John. I think your example to us all of how you can actually run a gospel-centered rescue mission without federal funding. And it is possible. And, using relationships, using churches, using your community, and the Perfect Vision Dinner as a tool and a catalyst to really help get the vision out there. And I think that's a key piece of this is once you kind of get the ball rolling, you need a place to get the vision out. And I remember someone asked you a while ago, what was the 50-year vision of your rescue mission? What did you tell them?
Our 50-year vision is that the Niagara Gospel Mission becomes a seminary, and we're training missionaries to go out to all the countries that come visit Niagara Falls.
Nice.
I
love that.
Yeah, me too.
You have a vision, right? And it's beyond just getting people off the streets and getting them a shelter,
Help them in the here and now.
Right.
It's about the future.
So work yourself out of a job. Right?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for joining us on this episode of the Fundraising Masterminds podcast. Be sure to subscribe and comment. Let us know what you think. If you are running a gospel rescue mission, we'd love to hear from you. And just let us know your thoughts on what we discussed today. And as always, we'll see you in the next one.
Take care.